Welcome back, everyone, and today I'm going to be going over the 10 worst pieces of real estate advice I have ever heard, and I hear them over and over again, especially online. Look, there's a lot of noise out there from online influencers, YouTubers, and so-called financial gurus telling you what you should do in regards to real estate. And the worst part is most of these people have never worked a day in real estate in their life. They have absolutely no credentials to back up what they're saying. And even worse than that, the advice they're giving will cost you tens of thousands of dollars, have you making huge financial mistakes and making your life miserable by making the wrong purchase. So today I'm going to go over those 10 pieces of advice, why they're wrong. I'm going to call out some of these influencers by name because most of you are probably listening to some of them, so you'll know who to listen to and who not to. And I'll also go over who's getting it right and why. Now, if you're wondering why you should listen to me, my name is Rich Curtis. I've been selling homes for nearly 20 years now in markets ranging from the Great Recession to the COVID market insanity and everything in between. So I'm going to use that 20 years of real estate knowledge to help you cut through the noise and not listen to these truly terrible bits of real estate advice. So let's get stuck right into it with bad advice number one. Bad advice number one, your home is your largest financial investment. Now, you've heard that over and over and over again, and online financial influencers love to say this, and it's not 100% wrong. For most families, their home is going to be one of, if not their biggest financial investment of their lifetimes. But where we might take issue is with that word investment, because it is not purely an investment. And if you're going to make it your biggest financial investment, are there other things that might be a better investment in purely financial terms? And the answer to that, I believe, is yes. Now, I told you I'm going to tell you some people who get it wrong. I'm also going to tell you some people who get it right. And in this regard, there is an online financial influencer named Ramit Sethi who gets this, I think, mostly right. Now, Ramit's content is great. And if you're going to listen to anyone online about financial information, it should be him. Go ahead and check him out. And on this front, he often tells people, hey, that's not exactly true. It's not your biggest, or at least not your best financial investment. And here's his point, and he's not wrong. For most of recorded financial history, homes, real estate, your personal home has chugged along at about 2 to 3% appreciation a year. Okay, now inflation has also chugged along at about 2 to 3% a year, meaning for most of recorded financial history, investments in a personal home have just about kept pace with, or maybe just slightly outpaced inflation, depending on the year. Now, he freely admits that the last 20 years have been an anomaly, and he's right in that regard. We have seen some outsized, amazing returns in residential real estate. And for people who have been investing in real estate, even just buying their own personal homes in the last 20 years, they have probably done very, very well for themselves in real estate. But that is historically the exception rather than the rule. Now, that could continue making real estate a really great option. But he does rightly point out that people often don't calculate the full cost of home ownership in terms of maintenance costs and repairs and things down the road. And what he encourages people to do, and I do too, is do a rent versus own calculation. If you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you know we drop these videos on Saturdays, and I have a weekly podcast with my lender that I do on Wednesdays. And on that podcast, you'll have heard us many times say, go online, Google a rent versus own calculator, do that calculation for your town or city, and see if it makes sense for you where you live. And I think that is truly great advice. Now, most of the time, it'll actually, especially if you're in kind of expensive rental areas like California, most of the time it's going to come out and tell you probably home ownership is better. But what if it doesn't? What if you get a no? What if it says, hey, you should rent in this area? And Ramit points out where he lives in New York City, that's the case. The cost of real estate is so ridiculous, it's better to rent. Now, the premise here is that you are going to do something else with that money, that you are going to invest that money in something different. So the idea is you would take your rent in the city where it makes more sense to rent versus owning, and you would calculate what your mortgage payment would be if you would own, and you would invest the difference in the stock market, so you're getting stock market returns and just paying your rent for the place you're going to live. Now, this works, and you probably will win financially doing that if you're the type of person who can be very responsible and disciplined and do that every single month, month after month, year after year. Now, here's where Ramit's argument breaks down a little bit. He doesn't, in my opinion, go deep enough into the psychology of this. He simply says to you, hey, if you get a no and it says you should keep renting versus owning and you want to buy anyway, at least be honest with yourself about why you're doing it. It's not for the investment. He's right. What he doesn't do is go through why you would make that choice. What are those other reasons beyond the investment that you would purchase a house? Let's start with the financial reasons to purchase the house, even though it may not be the ultimate best investment. Most people are not super rigid and diligent every month in their investing. So if you are going to invest the difference and you're really going to do it, great, go ahead. For most of us, we are human beings. We are just large raccoons. We like shiny things, right? We like cars and watches and jewelry and vacations and going out to bars and eating sushi and all of these other things that distract us and take our money. Maybe travel. I myself love to travel, and if I was to take the lower rent payment, I would likely take the difference and get on a plane and shoot off to Iceland and go have a fun trip for a week or two and not invest it. And so it's very easy to not make the choice to make those investments. So what the mortgage payment does is it is a forced savings account, a forced month-by-month investment. You're going to keep making that payment because you want to keep your home. So if you would be diligent and invest the difference, you might win in the stock market. But if you're not going to be that diligent and you know yourself, be honest with yourself, then even though you might get less returns, depending on the period of time we're talking about on your residential real estate, you'll at least have some returns because you will be forced to do it. Now, that is a financial reason to make your home your biggest financial investment. If you're not diligent enough to invest in some low-cost index funds month after month, year after year. But there are other reasons as well, and these come down to lifestyle. I can't live inside my brokerage account. I can't throw my kid's birthday party inside my low-cost index funds. So your home is an investment that you get to live in and have the pride of ownership in. Give your family stability. Lock in your rental housing costs over time with a 30-year fixed mortgage so they don't go up as your rents do. It becomes the hub of your life. It builds strong communities. So there are lots of other tangential reasons to purchase a home that aren't purely the financial. And that's what I was talking about when I said oftentimes referring to a home as your largest financial investment makes you think about it in the wrong way and makes you make the wrong decisions. For example, it might be a great real estate investment decision to buy a 2-unit duplex that needs some elbow grease and fixing up in a slightly marginal neighborhood where there's good rent, right? That might be a great financial decision. However, do you want to move your family into a duplex that needs a bunch of work in a slightly marginal neighborhood? Do you want to do that? Is that where you want to live? Is that where you want the hub of your life? One's a great financial or investment decision, but maybe not a great life decision. And that's why thinking of your home as your primary investment can cause you to make the wrong decisions. You should be thinking of your primary residence as a hedge against your rent going up, a forced savings or investment account, but mostly the hub of your life, where you're going to raise your kids, where you're going to build your community, where you're going to put your stake in the ground and say, this piece is mine and we're going to move on with our life from here. And that is a very different set of criteria and a very different decision-making process. So is someone like Ramit right? Absolutely. Do your rent versus own calculation. Decide whether it makes more sense to rent or own in your community, but then evaluate whether you personally want the tangential benefits that I'm talking about that really have strong effects on your life of home ownership, or whether you are really focused on investment returns and you're going to rent and dump that money in the stock market. Those decisions are above my pay grade. My idea with this channel is to always give you the information you need so you can make the highest quality financial and real estate decisions you can from the comfort of your couch. So take this information and you decide. All right, we're about to jump into bad real estate advice number 2. But before we do, I'd like to ask you if you're getting anything out of this video, hit the like button, click subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss another video with crucial advice to help you with your real estate decisions. All right, bad real estate advice number 2, date the rate, marry the house. Now this one is one of my absolute most hated pieces of real estate advice ever. One, it's just this cliche, trite aphorism thing that's just yuck, right? And this one isn't actually to blame on the online influencers. My industry owns this one. These are realtors and lenders saying this to people. Now, the point they're trying to make isn't 100% wrong. The point they're trying to make is, hey, if you're in a higher interest rate environment, but you find a home you love, buy the home, suck it up and accept the higher interest rate with the knowledge that down the road you'll likely be able to refinance and reduce that interest rate later on. Now, this is potentially good advice if you find your dream home and it works out like they say it does, but it doesn't always work out that way. There were realtors and there were lenders saying that in 2022 and 2023, and here we are in the winter of 2025 and we're still sitting right about 7% for interest rates. It hasn't come down. So all the people they told to date the rate and marry the house, well, they married the rate and married the house. They're still at those high interest rates. And if that was something that was unaffordable for them, they could be in a real pickle right now. And that's the problem with this advice. The other problem with this advice is it never actually takes into account whether you will be able to take advantage of the lower rates when the time comes. So hear me out. What if in between buying your home and the rates coming down, you lost your job? Now, maybe you've got a severance package. Maybe you're still able to pay your mortgage and you're not going to lose the house, but you technically have no income. No income, no refinance, no lowering the rate. Now you're stuck at the higher interest rate. And worse, you're stuck at the higher interest rate while you have no income coming in. What if instead of being fired, you just are in an industry where they reduced your hours and now you don't make enough to qualify? What if you had a child and you made the decision to keep one parent home to be with the child and intentionally reduced your own income, but now you don't qualify for a loan and you can't refinance? You still have to qualify in order to refinance and take advantage of those lower rates. What if in the interim you racked up a whole bunch of medical debt that you couldn't pay and it went to collections and it popped on your credit report? Now you don't qualify. What if in the interim you retired? You had a full income when you took the loan and now you are just on Social Security. Now you don't qualify for the loan and you can't refinance and you're stuck with that high interest rate forever. So this advice about dating the rate and marrying the house only works if you know you have secure employment in a recession-proof industry and you're not gonna retire anytime soon and you don't have any of these life problems that just crop up for people all the time. So marry the house, date the rate. You have to be really careful with this advice. I don't like it one bit. I think it is better to say, hey, these are the interest rates at the time. Can you afford it now? Okay, if you can, it's a good choice. Do you have stable employment? Do you have an emergency fund? And do you know you have some life challenges coming up? Do you have elderly parents that are going to need care soon? And maybe you're going to move across the country to take care of them, which means you're going to have to sell this house sooner rather than later. Maybe you are going to have to take on the financial burden of these people, and that will make you take on debt and you don't qualify. Look ahead, think through what's coming up for you in your life, and really decide whether you think you'll even be in a position to take advantage of those better rates when they come. So it's better and it's a more honest discussion to say, can you afford it at these rates right now? You might not like it. None of us like paying 7%. I'd rather be paying 2% like we were during COVID or 3%. But can you do it? Is it safe financially for you now? If so, move forward. If not, do not take on a loan banking on the ability to reduce the rate in the future, because nobody can guarantee that the rates will come down or that you personally will be able to take advantage of them when they do. And that's what makes this bad advice. Hey, if at the end of this video you still aren't sure what real estate decision is right for you and your family, feel free to reach out to me via the contact information on your screen or in the description down below. Like I said, I've been selling homes here for over 20 years now, and I've helped hundreds of families just like yours decide where to land or what to do, or help them with their real estate decisions, and I'm always happy to help. So feel free to reach out. Now, on with dispelling the bad real estate advice. Bad real estate advice number 3, always buy the biggest house you can, max out your budget, max out your payment comfort, and you'll grow into it because your income will go up over time. Okay, boomer. No, I'm just kidding. I like boomers. I love them. Don't light me up in the comments down below. But what I mean by that is that this advice is usually given by a parent or grandparent whose financial worldview was created and sculpted in a post-World War II America, where money was cheap to borrow and plentiful, and where wages were going up year after year after year, and it was really a boom time, right? Now, fast forward to today, where we are looking at runaway inflation for the last few years, families who never even recovered from the Great Recession, nearly 5 decades of wage stagnation for blue-collar workers, and fiscal policy flying off the Resolute desk quicker than you can say Sharpie. So to say there is some uncertainty in the US economy is an understatement. And with that uncertainty requires all of us to be a little more conservative with our money. So maxing out your budget and maxing out your monthly payment comfort in the hopes that your income will go up might not be the best strategy in an economy where there is some uncertainty. What happens if inflation takes off again and everything starts costing lots more? Will you still be able to make the payment? What happens if you lose your job or your hours are reduced? Will you still be able to make the payment? Now, if you've maxed it out and put yourself right at your limits with no financial guardrails, the answer could be no, and that could spell disaster for your family. And that is something that I personally would hate to hear and not want to be a part of. So again, I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice, but I would encourage you, rather than maxing out your payment and buying the biggest house you can afford, dial it back a little bit. Be a little more conservative. Buy a more modest home with a payment you can comfortably afford to give yourself some financial freeboard, to sock a little money away every month in that emergency rainy day fund, to give yourself a little bit of financial cushion so that if prices rise or you lose a job, you are not in a world of hurt on day one. You have money you can tap into to pay that mortgage, keep a roof over your head, and take care of your family. Look, again, these decisions are above my pay grade. If you want to go big and max everything out, that's your choice. But as a real estate advisor, my encouragement to you is dial that back a little bit, buy something you can afford, and save a little bit of money for the things that you can't anticipate that are coming down the road. Bad real estate advice number 4, buy a brand new construction home so you won't have any repairs to worry about. I hear this one all the time, and this is truly terrible advice. But let's start with who this might be good advice for. There are a few people this would be good advice for. 1, retirees. Maybe you're older and you're on a fixed income and you do want a house where you're not gonna have any out-of-pocket costs for repairs, or physically repairs are going to be a problem for you. Or maybe you want the community infrastructure that comes with a new home, things like swimming pools, gyms, and clubhouses that you don't have to maintain. That is a great reason and a class of buyers that should consider new construction. Also, what if you're the hyper busy family that travels a ton for work and you don't have time to deal with any kind of home maintenance projects, and you don't have time to maintain swimming pools or the front yard, and an HOA in a new construction environment provides all this for you so you can spend what free time you do have with your family. That's another great use case, another great category of buyers to consider new construction. Finally, what if you are the tragically unhandy family? What if you don't know which end of the hammer you're supposed to hit the nail with, and you don't know the difference between a Phillips head and a flathead? Then new construction is absolutely for you. No judgment, no shade, but if you don't know what you're doing and you shouldn't be doing home improvement projects, then new construction is a great option. However, for most people, new construction, financially speaking, is going to be a loss rather than a gain. Not that you will lose money on it, but that you would make more money if you bought a residential resale home. So the problems with new construction are that it's all brand new. There's not much you can do to put your stamp on it or to make it worth more money. You will have a backyard that you can do, which is something you should know about new construction, which is most of the time the backyard isn't included. It's just a dirt patch that you have to spend money immediately on to make it something else. And that is a place where you can distinguish it a little bit from the neighbors. Now, most people sell on average every 7 to 10 years. After the pandemic, it's been more like 10 years because of the lock-in effect of the low interest rate loans that nobody wants to give up. But in a new construction community, you all bought right around the same time. You've all lived there right about the same length of time, which means a bunch of you are going to decide to sell right at the same time. And I can tell you that putting up a real estate sign in a new construction community spreads faster than the flu at your kid's elementary school. Once that first sign goes up, then the signs start popping up everywhere because the neighbors say, you know what, I've been thinking about selling too. Look what he's asking. Look what he's getting for this house. I want that money too. And the signs start popping up. The first few houses sell, and whatever they sell for, that's what the houses are worth, because all of them are the same and have been owned for the same amount of time and are relatively indistinguishable from each other. So you get pretty much price fixed, and you have a lot of direct competition when you come to market, usually when you've bought into a new construction community. Also, I should tell you, there is no guarantee that you don't have home improvement projects, construction defects, or problems with a new construction home. In fact, many of my clients who have bought new construction homes over the years have had significant construction defects, significant problems with the home that they've had to work with the builder over numbers of years to get fixed. Do you have a warranty? Yes. Do you have a builder on the hook to fix them? Most of the time. Know that they will try to weasel out of it if they can, but still, it does not guarantee that you are not going to have problems with the home. So you should really consider that strongly when deciding between new construction or residential resale. For the vast majority of people, residential resale is going to be the better move. I have an entire video on that. I'll link to it at the end and in the description down below. If you want to go deep into new construction versus residential resale and which one is a better financial choice, you can watch that whole video. But just know that the advice to buy new construction so you don't have problems with the house just doesn't stand up. Bad real estate advice number 5 is buy a fixer-upper, you'll make more money. Now look, on the face of this, of course this isn't terrible advice. If you buy the ugliest house in the neighborhood and fix it up, you probably will make money, and more money than your neighbors who bought a all fixed up house and then sold it, right? This is real estate 101, but this is not good advice for everybody. And I would argue it's actually only good advice for a very small subset of the buyer pool. And I'll explain by sharing a story with you about the best real estate advice I ever got. Now, when I was looking to buy my first home, it was a great time to make money in real estate. It was about midway through the Great Recession. Prices were very low, and I found a fixer-upper. It was on a great piece of land, and we would have been happy living there for some time, but the real benefit of it was it needed a ton of work, and it was in a neighborhood of homes that at the time went for $600,000 to $800,000. Now, back in 2008, in El Dorado County, that was a lot of money. That was a high-priced neighborhood. And this home was sub $300,000, which meant I had a lot of upside, a lot of freeboard, and I was a realtor. I knew that. I looked at the project, I decided this is a great idea for me and my wife, and we got into contract on it. Now, unfortunately, a very strange thing happened during that, which was the man living in the home passed away in the home while we were in escrow. And it turned out the owner was in prison, and the story unraveled from there with friends of hers looting the house and pulling appliances out and all of that. Still, through all of that, I was convinced this was a good investment and I was going to move forward with the house. But I brought my father-in-law down to take a look at it with me. He was also in real estate and a home builder, and he loves building homes, loves working on homes. That's his passion. He looked at the project with me, said, "You're absolutely right. It's a great home for a great price. And if you do it, you are going to make a lot of money." And then he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "But you shouldn't buy this home, Rich." And I thought, what the heck are you talking about? You said, I'm right. It's a great investment. I'm going to make a lot of money. And he said, "You don't want to work on a house every weekend. You like to go rock climbing, whitewater rafting, mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding. You want to spend your weekends out playing in the woods and having fun. You're not me. I want to spend my weekends working on houses. This would be a great buy for me. This is a terrible idea for you. It's going to eat up your every weekend for the next 2 to 3 years. You're going to be living in a construction zone while running your business. You're going to be stressed out, and you're going to be angry and resentful that you spend every weekend working on this house rather than out playing in the woods." He was 100% hands down correct. It was a great financial investment. I would make more money by buying the fixer-upper, but I wasn't the right guy to do it. My wife and I went on to buy a move-in ready home and spend our weekends doing exactly what he said, out playing in the woods, and we're happy as a clam doing that and so glad we took his advice. So when someone says buy a fixer-upper, you have to decide, are you the fixer-upper type? Are you handy? Can you do the work yourself? Because if you hire out the work, you're going to eat up your profit margins really, really quickly. Are you comfortable, and can your marriage handle the stress of living in a construction zone for a long time, sometimes multiple years? Is this work you want to do, have the skills to do, and have the budget to do? If the answer to any of those is no, fixer-uppers aren't right for you. So putting this out there as this blanket real estate knowledge, buy a fixer-upper, that's the only way to go? No, for the vast majority of people, that's probably not the right choice. If it is the right choice for you, there's a lot of money to be made there. Go ahead and get after it. But for most of you, you're going to be better off buying a relatively move-in ready home and getting on with your life and doing the other things in your life that you like to do. Bad real estate advice number 6 is this: take a 15-year mortgage or make double mortgage payments and pay off your home in half the time. Now, look, the biggest proponent of this one online and in print is none other than financial guru himself, Dave Ramsey. Now, Dave gets a lot of things right. If you are deep in debt, buy his books, Financial Peace, Financial Freedom, do his debt snowball, get out of debt, and he will change your life. He has changed millions of people's financial lives. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here and disregard everything Ramsey has to say. And again, I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice, but in this regard, I deeply disagree with Dave, and here's why. Let's break it down. First off, home affordability is at an all-time low. Most Americans can't even afford a home at a 30-year fixed mortgage, never mind nearly double the payment with a 15-year mortgage. So there's really no advice here. Most people couldn't do this if they wanted to. Now, if you're a person with a lot of money, you have a lot of means, and you want to do this because you don't like the idea of having a home payment, then rock and roll, get after it. But for most of us average working day Americans, this simply isn't possible. All right, let's say you can afford to pay a 15-year mortgage payment or make double mortgage payments to pay off your mortgage in half the time. Still don't, and here's why. Let's game this out a little bit. Let's say you've been doing that, you've been making your diligent double payments or 15-year payments for several years now, and because of that, you're dedicating a lot of your extra disposable income to doing that, so you're not building up much of an emergency fund, and you lose your job. All right, you've been making all these extra payments, you've lost your job, you have no money coming in, and you call up your lender and say, hey, I can't make the mortgage payment for a little bit, but I have been, making those double payments. Can we extend those a little bit? Give me a little bit of grace while I figure this out. The answer is a resounding no. You don't pay, they foreclose, period. Once you hit 30 days late, they file in California. This is the process. They file a notice of default against you. After 60 days of non-payment, they file a second notice of default. After 90 days of non-payment, they file a third notice of default. After 120 days of non-payment, they file a notice of trustee sale, which means your home is going to be auctioned. And at day 150, if you don't intervene, they auction your home on the county courthouse steps to the highest bidder. Game over. Doesn't matter how much you'd paid them up to that point. Now, there are lots of things you can do to avoid that from happening. If you have enough equity, you can sell the home and pay them off. You can work on forbearance and other things. So usually it takes longer than that 150 days. But technically speaking, per the law, if the lender wants to be a jerk about it and go full speed ahead, you can lose the home within 150 days of missing your first payment, and they are going to extend you zero grace, zero goodwill for all of the years that you were making them double payments. They are not going to take into account the fact that you were making a 15-year payment when you could have made a 30-year payment. They could care less. You are getting foreclosed on. No pay, no house. That's how it goes. Hopefully you had some equity and you could just sell it instead, but still in this scenario, you are forced to either sell the home or be foreclosed on. Now, let's look at this a different way. Let's game out the alternate scenario. Instead of making double payments or making a 15-year fixed payment, which again, that's the Ramsey advice, you go ahead and take the difference between those two payments. That would be about the same as your mortgage payment, that extra amount of money a month that you were gonna cover the extra mortgage payment with, and you invest the difference. You will have a ton more money in your brokerage account. Let's say instead of just investing the difference, you split it. And you put half of it in an emergency fund and half of it in an investment account. Let's say instead of putting it in half in an emergency fund, half in an investment account, you put it all in an emergency fund. Now you lose your job. You cannot make your payments anymore because you have no income coming in, and you call the lender and they once again extend you zero grace and say, we're starting the foreclosure process. Well, what do you have now? You have a huge emergency fund that you've been stockpiling money in for several years that you can use to make the payments in the interim while you look for a new job or consider whether you do want to sell the house. But at least you're not doing it with a gun to your head under pressure, because if you don't, it's going to get foreclosed on. Also, if you've been doing half in the emergency fund and half in the brokerage account, you have liquefiable assets in the brokerage account. You don't want to sell them maybe, but you could sell them and use that money to cover your living expenses while you look for a new job. See the point here? You've got options. Once you send all that money to the mortgage company, they're not giving it back. The only way to get that money back is to sell the house. And still, you're only getting the difference between what you owe and what you sold for. So coughing up extra money every month to your mortgage company simply doesn't make sense. It doesn't give your family the financial security and freeboard and options that taking that extra money and putting it in an emergency fund, a brokerage account, or some combination of the two does. Again, this is not financial advice, but I disagree with Dave. I don't think you should pay off your home. I think you should dedicate those additional asset money to other assets that will accrue for you, like stocks or emergency fund or a combo of both to protect your family. Now, of course, what I just said is a hotly contested discussion amongst all of the groups. There are diehard people that are pay off your mortgage people. Ramsey is one of them, and a lot of his acolytes fall into that category. There are diehard never buy a house, invest people. There are diehard emergency fund people. You have to decide where you stand on this, and I'm sure the comments will blow up. And feel free to tell me down below. You think I'm wrong, or you have a different plan? Let us know what you're gonna do. But for my money, I like flexibility and multiple assets and multiple accounts where I have money to protect my family, because I never know what the world is gonna throw at me. Now, if you wanna go deeper into this subject, you can pull up all kinds of studies online that will show you at a certain mortgage amount and a certain amount going into the investment account that after the guy who paid off his mortgage in 15 years, the other guy who's been paying his mortgage and investing the difference, or woman, that person has enough in the brokerage account to pay off the house and money left over. Sometimes 6 figures or 7 figures worth of money left over. So there are plenty of people smarter than me that have done the math all the way out, and you can pull those up and look at the math yourself to make a choice. But there's some really interesting research out there, including this guy Bruce Feiler in his book Life is in the Transitions, that makes the point that human beings experience what he calls a life quake on average every 5 years. This is an illness or health crisis yourself, a family member having an illness or a health crisis, a recession, a war, a job loss. All of these things that life throws at us happen once on average about every 5 years. That's pretty staggering. We all would like to believe that our life is going to be this hockey stick on the graph up and to the right, just soaring and getting better and better all the time, but that's not really how life works. It's going to look a little more like your EKG, up and down, up and down. And when you get hit with these life quakes, they're all easier with a little bit of cash in the bank. And that's why I disagree with Ramsey on this one about paying off your home first. Bad real estate advice number 7. And look, I hear this one all the time. And I've had people tell my clients who I'm already working with this advice. Always call the agent on the sign, the listing agent, when you're buying a home, and try to work with them directly, because the seller will take less money for the house and you'll get a deal. Now look, there are a lot of things wrong with this advice. And let's start with fiduciary duty. Now, this is not a real estate law class and I'm no lawyer. However, realtors are bound to their clients by the highest duty one person can be bound to the other by in law, and that is called a fiduciary duty. And that means that listing agent has signed an agency relationship agreement with that seller, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to represent them and their best interest in this transaction, and they don't have that with you. Now, they do have a legal obligation to tell you the truth, but they do not have a legal obligation to be working in your best interest. And those are very, very different things. So anytime you're working with that listing agent and they already have a client with a previous relationship, they're not acting in your best interest. Now, someone out there, if they're an actual realtor watching this, which would be interesting, they'll say, well, hey, when we do dual agency, we sign a new agency relationship with that buyer. Now we do have a fiduciary duty to that buyer. That's true. And if you're in that situation where you're doing dual agency, and again, this is California specific, I can't speak to the laws in all of the other 49 states. However, if you do that, now this agent supposedly legally has a fiduciary duty to both people. That is very, very hard to pull off. That is very hard to pull off from a legal standpoint. That is very hard to pull off from a moral standpoint and from a functional standpoint. When they're talking to you, they have to put the I'm representing you hat on and remember the stuff they know from the seller that they are not allowed to tell you because it would breach their duty to the seller. And then when they take your needs and desires back to the seller, well, in part of that conversation, they're wearing the representing you hat. And then they have to put on the representing the seller hat and forget all the things that you've told them off to the side that could affect the negotiations that they're not supposed to tell the seller. And back and forth and on and on and on. It is very hard. As a realtor who's been doing this for 20 years, I've only done a dual agency situation a handful of times, and I've hated it every single time. As somebody who considers myself a very honest and very moral person, even when I'm trying my best, drawing those lines and remembering what to tell and what not to tell each person and doing that right is very, very hard. I don't like it. I actually don't even think it should be legal. That's an opinion. I think that dual agency shouldn't be a thing. So I really, really dislike this advice. I don't think you should do that. Now let's address the part of it where you're gonna get a better deal out of the seller because they don't have to pay half of the commission, so they're just gonna automatically credit you that 2.5% that they were gonna pay the buyer's agent, or the 2% or the 3%, whatever they decided they were gonna pay a buyer's agent, they're gonna credit you that. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen for a couple of reasons. One, that seller still wants every penny out of the house, so they might give you a little discount, but they're not giving you the full amount. Two, their agent isn't going to do dual agency if they're worth their salt for the standard fee they've already negotiated with that seller, because doing dual agency is twice the work, twice, and in my opinion, more than twice the liability and problems and headaches. So any agent worth their salt is still going to charge them an extra % or 2, depends on the agent, it's always negotiable, but they're going to charge more for that service as well, which means the seller doesn't even have the amount of freeboard to credit you that you think they do. So you have diminished your negotiating power. So at best, you are getting a representative that is struggling to meet your basic needs and their basic fiduciary duty to you, and might get you a little bit of a discount. And at worst, you're getting an agent that's very compromised in their ability to do the best job for you, and you're getting no discount at all. This advice simply doesn't serve you as a buyer. Go out, interview multiple buyer's agents, find the one with the most experience that you trust, and have them represent you on any transaction you're gonna do. Do not work with the other person's agent in real estate ever, in my opinion, in any of the states. Bad real estate advice number 8. Always start with a really, really low ball number with your first offer and come up from there, and you'll end up at a better price. Now look, this one, like all of these, isn't completely wrong. It's actually based in some sound science, but it often backfires in the realm of real estate. So let me explain the differences between some other negotiations that you'll enter into in your life and real estate negotiations. And I'll point to another influencer here who has a lot to say in this regard and has a lot of skill and experience to back it up, and that is Chris Voss. He was the former FBI head hostage negotiator. Now, you can't really get any better credentials than that for someone to teach you negotiations. And I've taken master classes from this guy. He is amazing. And if you want to learn how to negotiate, take his word as gospel. He is excellent. And what he will tell you is start with what he calls an extreme anchor. Another word for that is low ball, a really low ball offer. And then he has this staged coming up from there in 3 different distinct oddball numbers, and then you throw in something random into the deal which shows you've got no more money left, so you're throwing in your bottle of whiskey or something like that. He's got this really cool way of negotiating, and it does work. It's great for going into the car dealership and beating them up and getting a great price on the car dealership. His stuff, I've used his stuff consistently to get great upgrades on hotel rooms and seats on flights and things like that. It's really great. But here's where starting with an extreme anchor or a lowball offer backfires in terms of real estate. This is an emotional negotiation. Of course, all negotiations have some emotion. However, when you're going in to buy a car from the guy, the only emotion is that he wants to earn his money. He wants to get his numbers up. But this asset, what he's selling, the value of it isn't his. He doesn't really care about the number. He has some numbers he has to hit, and he has to work with you to get there. But he doesn't care about that asset. He has no emotional attachment to the brand new car that he's trying to sell you. The guy selling you the sofa doesn't have an emotional attachment to it. The person booking you in at the hotel doesn't have an emotional attachment to which room you get, other than if you're a jerk, they're going to give you the bad room, right? So when it comes to homes, this is a big emotional thing. This has been the hub of people's lives. In my home, I can tell you where I was standing when my wife told us we were pregnant with our first son and our second child, our daughter. I can tell you the place I was standing when I got the news that eventually led to the death of my mom. I can tell you the place I was standing when I got the notice of my first deal coming through and we were off to the races in our business. I can tell you the place I was standing when I hit the bestseller status on the book I had published. I can tell you exactly where I was in this home when all these big moments in my life happened. I can tell you where I was standing when the news came through that they were shutting the schools down on my kids for the pandemic. All of these things that have happened, good, bad, ugly, in my life, happened while I lived here. And there are places where those memories and those feelings are attached. And this place, this home, has a lot of value to me that is not based in any kind of logic or market statistics or anything like that. And I'm no different than you, even though I'm in the business. It may shock you to find out that when realtors list their own homes, we call in a colleague to come gut check our number because we cannot give an accurate number for our own homes because we're really emotionally attached to them. I often bring in a colleague to gut check my numbers when I list like a parent's home, the home I grew up in, because I'm too emotionally attached to that place to really give it a fair market value that's not clouded by my own biases. And so even though I think Chris's negotiation strategy works really good in most situations, when you're dealing with something that someone has a strong emotional attachment to, a lowball offer comes with an air of insult. And so you have to be very careful how low you go. Now, this doesn't mean you don't come in below asking. This doesn't mean you don't negotiate hard and try to get the best deal. It just means using an extreme anchor or an extreme lowball offer when it comes to an asset that somebody's emotionally attached to could backfire in the negotiations. I've literally tried to counsel clients not to do this, had them do it anyway, and had sellers say, the heck with you, I'm not working with this person. I wouldn't sell in my house for anything. And they just take their ball and go home. And now this person has lost their shot at the house. I think a lot of realtors steer people towards making these extreme lowball offers because they have confused their fiduciary duty with getting the lowest price for the house. Our duty is to represent our clients' interests and to get our clients what they want. And if what they really, really want is this house, no matter what, then an extreme lowball offer might actually be counter to that fiduciary duty. Now, if it's an investment client, they're totally emotionally detached and it is all dollars and cents, then go ahead, lowball the heck out of them, do your thing, because the agent, their fiduciary duty is to get you that lowest price because that's what that client wants. But if what you want is this home, because this is the home you see yourself raising your family in, negotiate strongly, but don't start with an extreme anchor. Don't start with a very lowball number because it very well may backfire. There's also multiple rounds of negotiation in real estate. When you negotiate the car, you're done, you buy the car, you drive away, there's nothing left. When you negotiate the price of a home, then you do inspections. This is different in certain markets, but in our market, then you do inspections. You might find a bunch of things wrong with the home. You might have another round of negotiation. If you have burned up all of your goodwill with the seller by hitting them with a really hardcore lowball offer right off the bat, there's no goodwill left for you when you have to negotiate a new septic system or a new well or some pest repairs or anything like that. So you also want to be mindful of preserving your goodwill and your social capital with that seller for some other things you're going to need to get out of them down the road. And that's why this tends to be not the best real estate advice. Bad real estate advice number 9. Your monthly mortgage payment should be no more than 25% of your take-home pay. Now this one again comes from none other than Dave Ramsey. And again, I'll give the caveat that Dave has some great advice for getting you out of debt, and I agree with him on a lot of things, especially emergency funds. However, he's dead wrong on this one. It's just not viable. Maybe if we hop in our DeLorean and fire up the flux capacitor and wing on back to 1952, it'll be nice and easy to have that mortgage payment be 25% of our monthly take-home pay. But with the cost of homes today, with home affordability at an all-time low, prices and interest rates at an all-time high, this is just insane advice. It basically means nobody would be able to buy a home. So let's look at the actual numbers of this. As the recording of this video in the winter of 2025, the average income, annual income for an American citizen is $65,000. Now, of course, there's a lot of you making more and some of you making less, but that's the average, $65,000. Here where I am in California, after take out taxes, you're going to have $4,114 a month take-home pay. Now, that doesn't even include if you're taking out some extra for 401k or for some health insurance or some deferred comp or anything else, right? That's just, if you just take out taxes, you're taking home $4,114 a month. That's not a lot to work with. Now, 25% of that number is a whopping $1,028 a month. Now, if you're looking at a PITI payment, and this is in an area where you don't even have to pay really particularly high fire insurance or whatnot, that's going to net you out the ability to buy about a $120,000 home. Now, look, I don't know the real estate market across the entire country. What I can tell you is there's nowhere in the state of California where I work where you're going to get anything livable, maybe not even anything non-livable, for $120,000. People here spend $120,000 on a camper van. That's just not possible to buy real estate at that price point. So what Ramsey's saying there is absolutely bananas. And in fact, the lenders allow debt to income ratios that are far, far higher than that. They'll allow people in some cases to go upwards of 40 to 50% of their monthly income towards their housing costs. Now, do I personally recommend you go that high? Again, this is not financial advice, but no, that would make me pucker. I would be real nervous if I was spending 50% of my take-home pay on my monthly mortgage. I was lucky enough to buy my home during the Great Recession a long, long time ago, and so mine is actually in the 20%, 25% range. But for most Americans, and especially buying right now, that's just not going to be a reality. So you have to look at what the lenders will allow, which is probably more than is safe or practical or smart for you to do, and disregard what Ramsey says and pick what you can actually comfortably do. No one knows your finances better than you. Look at what you can reasonably pay as a monthly mortgage and just take that number. Give that number to your trusted lender. If you need one and you're in my market, I can recommend one for you. If you're somewhere else, do a little online research, ask for some referrals, find a good lender to work with, give them that number. Here's what I'm comfortable paying. They can reverse engineer how much purchase price you can get while staying within that financial comfort zone, and then tell your realtor not to show you a single house above that mark. Because of course, if you can afford a $500,000 house and I show you a $600,000 house, you're gonna figure out a way to buy that $600,000 house every single time. You're gonna convince yourself to make some bad choices. So restrict yourself, you're online looking, to your payment comfort, restrict your realtor to your payment comfort, and make a wise decision. But if you're sitting at home and you really want to buy a house and you're maybe a Ramsey acolyte, you've been watching a lot of his stuff online, you're doing the calcs, you're like 25% of my monthly take-home pay, I can afford $150,000, $180,000 house, I'm never going to be able to buy a house. That's simply not true and not practical advice at this point. Get on the phone with a lender, find out what you can really do, assess your own payment comfort, and move forward. That 25%, and he used to say 20, and now he's up to 25, but it's still just wildly out of touch with the cost of real estate today. Bad real estate advice number 10. Hey, we're not finding what you want in these neighborhoods. Maybe you should expand your search, look further afield, look in these places you originally said you didn't want to look, because we'll have more options to show you. Now this one I don't think is really nefarious. I think oftentimes this happens in the course of a well-meaning realtor trying to do their job. You want this neighborhood at this price point and it doesn't exist. And so they are trying to help you find the type of home you want in an area where you can practically get it. And that makes sense. That is part of doing a good job for people. But here's where this advice can be dangerous or fall short. Everybody's heard the old adage, what's the most important three things in real estate? Location, location, location. Now, this is sort of trite, right? But it's really, really true. And I can't stress this enough. If I had to make a decision between buying a nicer house in a neighborhood I didn't really want to live in, or a lower quality or smaller house that would be harder to meet my needs in a better, higher quality neighborhood, or the neighborhood I wanted to be in, or the neighborhood that allows me to access the schools I wanted to access for my children, or the neighborhood that cuts down my commute times to my work, or the neighborhood that cuts down my commute times to my kids' schools, all of these things, 100% always buy the worst house in the better neighborhood rather than the better house in the worse neighborhood. Now, these realtors, again, they're not breaking that location, location, location advice. They're simply saying, well, if you're not going to budge on quality, then we got to go to these other places. And that makes sense. But I think a far more honest conversation, albeit a harder one to have with you as a buyer, is you should budge on quality. Always budge on quality over location. Someday you will be able to sock away enough money or earn more money, or your income will go up, hopefully, so that you can change the quality of the fit and finish of that home. You can get the paint colors you like, the countertops you like, the flooring you like. You can never, ever, ever move that house. And when people start looking further afield, and I see this a lot in environments like right now, where we're at all-time record high home prices, all-time record high interest rates, People will go searching, especially in my county. I work in 4 or 5 counties, but the main one here is El Dorado County. We have some really far-flung areas where you're 45-minute drive on windy country roads to get to the highway, where every time you want to take your kid to school, it's a half an hour, 40-minute drive. And then when you need to bring them back to soccer practice, another half hour, 40-minute drive. If you want to bring them to a friend's house, half an hour, 40-minute drive. And it really wears on people. When we're in a market like this, where it's hard to afford the houses that are closer in better locations, people start to buy in those more far-flung areas because they can get a nicer home out there. But it really wears on them in terms of quality of life with all that daily driving, all that extra commute time. And it also comes back to bite them in the backside when they go to sell, because you may not be selling in the same environment. What if when you go to sell, home prices are down, or there's just a lot more inventory, which also drives home prices down and gives more choice to the buyer, so it's easier for someone to buy in these closer in locations. Now it's much harder to sell a home in the far-flung location that you chose when prices were high, but it's still going to be easy to sell a smaller home that's closer in than the larger home that's further out down the road. So really think twice before compromising where you want to be. Remember, this is, while we talked about it may or may not be the largest investment of your life, it is certainly probably the most money you're going to spend on any one thing in your entire life. We can argue whether it's an investment or not, but it is a boatload of money. In Placerville right now, the median home price is $505,000. Unless you play in the World Series of Poker, you probably have no idea what a $500,000 stacked up on the table would look like in front of you. It's an inconceivable amount of money for most of us. And if you're going to spend that, you don't want to do it and end up in a place you don't want to be. So always take the lower quality home in the area you want to be rather than the higher quality home that's further out or in an area you don't want to be. All right, this wraps up our discussion of the 10 worst pieces of real estate advice I've heard over the last 20 years. And I hope this information helps you avoid this advice and avoid the mistakes associated with it. I know this was a long one. If you made it all the way to the end, you are deeply committed to your own real estate education, so hats off to you. Now, if you are thinking about buying a home right now, you may be wondering, should I buy now or wait? What does that look like? How do I make that choice? Well, you can click this video right here on whether you should buy now or wait. Or you may be taking that next first step, which is to get pre-qualified for a loan. You can watch this podcast episode here where my lender and I talk about how to get pre-qualified for a loan. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for making it to the end with me, and I'll see you on the next one.